Pereira. After a period of relative quiet, North Korea is once again in the headlines with the dramatic demolition of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office in the city of Kaesong, just north of the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas. The office was refurbished at considerable cost to South Korea following the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit and was intended to function as a virtual embassy between the two nations. Its destruction was an unmistakable indication of North Korea's displeasure with its neighbor and a dramatic end to 2 years of hope. Tensions between the Koreas have been rising after the North protested the launch of anti-North Korean propaganda-filled balloons and plastic bottles into North Korea by South Korean civic groups. Just 3 days before the liaison office's demolition, Kim Jong-un's powerful sister specifically threatened its destruction. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the tensions of the Korean Peninsula. Joining me on the program today are S.R. Tayal, former ambassador, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, foreign editor of the Hindustan Times, and Sanjay Kumar, research professor, Gangwon Research Institute of Korean Studies. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, let me begin the program with you. Let's first analyze and understand the current situation on the Korean Peninsula and the tensions between the North and South.
As all of us know, year 2018 was a year of hope where a lot of initiatives were taken by Chairman Kim Jong-un, by President Donald Trump, as well as by President Moon Jae-in. And it resulted in lots of agreements. Now, first thing is that the pace of all these negotiations is really being controlled by North Korea, by Chairman Kim Jong-un. And by his actions, whether it is missile firing, whatever it is, it controls the agenda. North Korea controls the pace, but it has not been able to influence the outcomes. Because what exactly is North Korea looking for? Regime survival, everybody knows. At that point, they want that economic sanctions should be eased, which are crippling their economy. And also, somehow, South Korea should be able to extend help of assistance, economic projects, etc., despite the sanctions and defying the United States. That was the expectation of Chairman Kim Jong-un from President Moon Jae-in. When the agreement, Panmunjom agreement, and the 2018 very detailed 20-page document on defense, how situation will be eased and tension will be eased on DMZ, and actually things happened. Lots of border posts were demolished and there was a general easing of tension. But there has not been any satisfaction to Chairman Kim Jong-un. Economic sanctions continue, and because of American pressure, you see, President Moon Jae-in tried to de-link North Korea-South Korea relations from North Korea-United States negotiations. But as soon as they started moving, there was pressure from the United States, and South Korea has really not been able to do anything on many projects. If you look at the blueprint of assistance and project, there are roads going through North Korea right up to China and Russia, and there is a eastern corridor, there is a western corridor. There is a very, very good blueprint which the South has prepared. And North, definitely Chairman Kim Jong-un wants regime survival, but he also wants economic progress for his people. But now United States has stalled the entire process, and this is the way of Chairman Kim Jong-un to come back to the limelight. But here I would like, it's my own thinking, that the invisible and malign hand of China is behind this timing, because the timing is very important. Why suddenly now? Because China is feeling under pressure and it wants to create pressure points for President Trump, particularly United States and the rest of the world, so that China again comes into play as a benign intermediary between North Korea and the rest of the world. So the timing, in my view, is being at the instigation of China which is, and of course, the dissatisfaction and frustration of Chairman Kim Jong-un, there are very valid reasons for it. They, after all, stopped testing. They are not testing. They have not had nuclear tests. And what have they
Right.
got in return? Nothing.
Okay. This issue of timing, I'm going to take it forward with you, Pramit. So what is your take on the timing really? Why now? Why at this juncture?
Well, we can only hypothesize because we don't. North Korea is a black box inside a gray shroud, inside a very dark hole. So very few of us actually know what's going on. In fact, almost nobody really knows what's going on within the Korean system. As the ambassador has mentioned, the Kim and Trump had been able to at least break the impasse of the past, where China and they held the Singapore meeting, and whatever else Trump did lay out a new opportunity that instead of getting caught into the old sort of system, you must denuclearize and we will not, or we will sanction and so on. He did sort of break that through. He then, as has been mentioned, nothing very much happened, and eventually the Americans went back on some of that, especially under the influence of hardliners like John Bolton, the former NSA, and so on in the government. But the Trump hasn't completely given up on this, and you'll notice that he still talks about Kim in a manner that I wouldn't mind still dealing with him. But obviously the Americans are distracted, and so potentially the Chinese or the Koreans themselves have decided that this is an opportunity. America is in an election, is fighting the pandemic. This is an opportunity to assert themselves and remind America, if you wish, about the offer that was there, and potentially even try, because if their assessment, most countries' assessments, is that Trump is looking for some sort of a diplomatic victory before the election, whether it's troop withdrawals from Afghanistan, his bizarre offers to mediate between India and China, or potentially resume North Korea, his North Korean dialogue. Another scenario is that this is driven by domestic situations. You remember that after an initial panic about the COVID pandemic, Kim Jong-un then disappeared for a while, then eventually was found at some coastal resort that he had gone away to. He seemed to have had some sort of an illness, something we don't know, a medical problem, and so on. But now you see mentioned his sister, who has been hanging around in the background for quite a while, has suddenly asserted herself. We don't know much about Kim Yo-jong, but it is not uncommon for Korean leaders when they begin to assert themselves within the political framework of North Korea, take extremely hardline positions to show that they are not weak. And potentially, again, we don't know for certain, it's a sign that she is beginning to become more powerful, is showing, especially being that she's a female, within the North Korean structure, to show to the military and the party hardliners that she is not going to be soft regarding anything. One of the things that at least strikes me is that she hasn't attacked the United States or Trump. She has focused solely on South Korea and President Moon, who is a relatively easy target. I mean, he's not going to be able to do anything against them. And his entire policy is driven by a desire to try to see if he can form some sort of a bridge with North Korea. So it seems that she may have asserted herself for domestic reasons, but has carefully avoided going after the United States so far.
Okay, all right. Taking the discussion forward now. So Sanjay Kumar, as far as the current situation is concerned, what was the trigger really, and what led to the present tensions between the two Koreas?
I would be rather talking from the South Korean perspective, because the Korean people out here, they are not seeing it as a successful diplomacy of President Moon, because President Moon came up in 2018 with the peace talks, and because of that, the current attacking in the Kaesong Samuchil, the office, most of the Koreans here are seeing it as a kind of failure to that hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
go ahead.
Panmunjom declaration failure is being seen from the South Korean perspective, and they are seeing it because the South Koreans are not very much interested, especially the young generation. They are not very much interested to see some kind of support in the form of aid to North Korea, and they were foreseeing Moon Jae-in government's policy to come up with some kind of financial aid, and because of that, many Koreans are not very satisfied, and they are very fearful. Most of them are also considering it as a reason for the upcoming kind of between North, South, and the US.
All right, then taking the discussion forward, Ambassador, let's talk about this whole issue of, a brief halt or a stop in the communication between North and South Korea. This seems like a routine exercise of escalation. It's not for the first time that something like this has happened. It's happened in the past as well. So, what is the history and how is it done really? And also, can we expect communication to restart again?
As I said, that the agenda and the pace of contact is really being determined, and it has been there for decades, perhaps, by North Korea. And whether it is United States or whether it is South Korea, they react to it, and then things move or they stall. So, one thing I would like to say is that Chairman Kim Jong-un is projecting a personality of being very mercurial and not dependable and unpredictable. But if you take his entire actions once he came into power suddenly in December of 2011, now it is 9 years, he is a very shrewd person. He has a very clear strategic objectives and how to leverage his strengths and how to pressurize his negotiating adversaries or partners. So all these are signals. One thing, even in this entire, as Mr. Chaudhary said, that there has been no allegation or name calling between Trump and Kim, number one. And these statements are not coming from Chairman Kim Jong-un. They are coming from his sister, so it shows the gravity, the seriousness of the situation. But it leaves room for Kim Jong-un to walk back, to have some new agreements. And so it is a signal, it's a very clear signal that and they are very disappointed surely with President Moon Jae-in, who did not even stop the sending of balloons, which they should have done. It is not serving any purpose, and it is against the spirit of the 2018 agreements. And I would place South Korea a little lax as far as this balloons business is concerned. Now they are taking action in legislature and administrative. It should have been done earlier. I think that is very fair. But there is no satisfaction to North Korea. After all, they have stopped testing, and they rightly say that let us get something in return. And it cannot be that all that has been done, there will be nothing in return from US. And as, of course, the hardliners in United States stopped the Hanoi agreement, even the tables have been placed and the agreement was practically ready. And South Korea, President Moon, the entire South Korean establishment was looking for a small deal and a big deal. Small deal to begin with, some easing of sanctions, and a lot of aid and projects flowing from South Korea to North Korea, and then gradually go towards denuclearization. So for South Korea, denuclearization is not a priority. I always, at every forum, I emphasize this. South Koreans, rank and file people, do not feel threatened by the North Korean tests. I was there at once or twice when the tests happened, and there was nothing. The world was going on as it was. We talk to taxi drivers, etc. They say it is all for United States. They will not drop it on us. So there is a total dissonance between what the US objectives are and what the South Korean objectives are. and President Moon has not been able to prevail upon United States to allow some aid, investment, etc., to flow to North Korea. He's trying to now send food through World Food Program and trying to use United Nations. So it will be a long game, and how United States can ease sanctions, it will be very, of course they can do it because they are the only country standing in the way. All the other 4 members and the entire Security Council will support it if the sanctions are eased. But I don't really see that happening soon, unless something very dramatic is offered by North Korea, which is really not on the cards.
Absolutely. So, Pramit, since we are here, let's talk about the role of the United States in all of this, and also what's different this time around when compared to the past between the tensions in the Korean Peninsula.
Well, before Trump, the Americans had effectively become locked in a certain position, as mentioned, which that denuclearization, breaking down of reactors and so on was at the heart of the American policy. So in effect, they tied the sanctions and other diplomatic niceties to the issue of at least a phased denuclearization, and even things like the abolition of the missile programs and so on and so forth. So this has become essentially fossilized between Pyongyang and Washington, that we will not do anything unless you move forward on these. And for the hardliners in Washington, the argument was, in effect, that we should do nothing. In fact, argued that Korea should essentially almost unilaterally denuclearize first, and then we will see about whether we can lift sanctions. So Trump, as I said, who, at least among other things, tends not to follow the routine that his bureaucrats say. And in fact, people I know who have worked with him say that if you normally tell Trump, this is how it's being done, his normal response was, then I will do it differently, just to be different. Especially if it's something Obama did, then he will definitely try to be different. So therefore, at least he broke the ice. He said, okay, let's try something completely, out of the way. And Trump has a certain belief in his personal charm that he can work with any world leader, irrespective of the bureaucratic failure to do any of the hard work underneath. So that led, if you may remember, to eventually the Singapore summit, and then eventually to the meeting in Hanoi. For whatever reason, and I'm not very clear, Trump seems to have then decided to follow the hardline position, and then went back to the issue of denuclearization. And then we've just now seen, and he's now basically lost interest, as far as anybody can tell, in the Korean Peninsula as a whole. He said little about it. He still says positive things about Kim. And so, as I said, that, as everybody's correctly said, that line remains open, the door remains open. The question is, how do you get Trump to pay any attention to you is very difficult. And right now, with the elections, American election campaign will effectively formally begin as soon as the party conventions are held next month. After this, normally the American system effectively shuts down. And on top of that, the State Department, the Defense Department, all have lost large numbers of their senior staff. So there's really no bandwidth for America to do very much. I should add that the Koreans also realize, I would argue that North Koreans realize that when Trump is not focusing on them, this automatically means that the establishment, the bureaucracy, whether the Pentagon or the State Department or the intelligence agencies, effectively recapture the policy. And if I'm Korea right now, even if I'm going to try to get America's attention, I do know that right now, for example, unusually, and it may have to do more with China than them, the Americans have 3 carrier task groups in the Western Pacific. That's not happened since the last Korean crisis of 2017. I mean, America has 4 carrier task forces right now present in the world, and 3 of them are effectively off the coast of Korea. So even if nothing else, given the Koreans anyway tend to be the North Koreans tend to be a little paranoid, they would be wary of attacking the United States at a time when an enormous degree of firepower is effectively lying on their horizon. Really unprecedented, the amount of firepower. And almost every forward deployed submarine an estimated 10 of the nuclear ballistic submarines of America are all in the Western Pacific. I don't think it has to do with Korea. It has more to do with China, but for whatever reason, if I'm sitting in Pyongyang, I'm going to be very careful.
Okay. All right. So, Sanjay Kumar, the South Korean unification minister quit as a result of the tensions between the North and the South. So, what kind of an impact is all of this going to have on the political class in South Korea?
From South Korean politicians' perspective, especially the current regime of Moon Jae-in, they want to take opposition also together in order to resolve this situation, and they need the support of opposition to negotiate again with the US. They want to have some kind of support and cooperation from the US counterpart, because in the last few years, even though Moon Jae-in government won the election, the local elections, the opposition was not convinced with the idea of cooperating with the North, and in the sense, the opposition saw Moon Jae-in government closer to China. So many of the opposition parties, they have gone against the government's policy also, and they have criticized the Moon government of being patronized by China. So because of this stand and this temporary incident, most of the South Korean opposition politicians, they want the government to once again stick with the US. They also want to support the current regime in order to minimize the escalation.
Okay, all right. So, Ambassador, let's talk about Kim Jong-un's sister. In fact, she has taken center stage. She's been making headlines over the recent past. It seems like, an effort is being made to bolster her credentials, and, especially after we saw newspapers reporting about the ill health of Kim Jong-un a couple of months ago. So, do you believe that an earnest effort is being made to ready the second rung in the North Korean political system as well?
In the North Korean, let's say, mythology, the Kim Il-sung bloodline is called Mount Paektu bloodline, that it comes from some very revered, like Mount Kailash type of a place, and the mother of wife of Kim Il-sung is called the mother of the revolution, and the three generations. And in 2013 or 14, the parliament passed a resolution that the revolution forever will be guided by the Mount Paektu bloodline. So they have put it in their constitution that the supreme leader of North Korea will always be from this bloodline. Even with Kim Jong-il, his sister was prominent, and of course the brother-in-law, who unfortunately was perhaps killed by Kim Jong-un, he was also very prominent in Kim Jong-il's regime. And now we see the promotion of Kim Yo-jong, but they are very young. Of course, Kim Jong-un is young, so his children reportedly are 2, but they would be about 7-8 years old. So they are very young, and there is this speculation that, of course, he had disappeared for 3-4 weeks. He looks a little obese and not very healthy. So is it an attempt to have some kind of a number 2? And the way she is being promoted, she is now a member of the Politburo, member of the National Parliament, and now she has emerged as the chief spokesperson practically. She is a member of the Central Committee. There are so many titles, and there are so many long titles, it's very difficult even to remember and try to describe them. But most certainly she is being positioned as number 2 in the North Korean system, both in the party, Korean Workers' Party, as well as in the government. But would be very Byzantine kind of a politics, and frankly, who is in favor, who is not in favor will keep changing, and lifetimes can also be very short. So any well-wisher of Kim Yo Jong will advise her to be very, very careful and be totally 100% guided and instructed by her brother.
Okay. All right. So, Pramit, what impact is what's happening on the peninsula is likely to have on the region as a whole?
Well, I think it has reminded, if you wish, definitely Japan, and to a lesser extent America, that North Korea remains in many ways arguably the most dangerous place in the world. It has there are in effect three nuclear states, nuclear armed states next to each other, and at least in the case of Japan, and a country that is probably one screwdriver twist away from having a nuclear weapon. It has one of the most volatile armed borders. Right now, India and China may be a little bit more volatile, but normally North Korea is much worse. South Korean peninsula is much worse. And it remains completely unresolved. There is no real has not been any real sign of progress in Northeast Asia now for quite a while. And with the Americans effectively distracted for the rest of the year, we will see, and China, if you wish, in a much more assertive, aggressive phase of its external policy. We will see a lot more tension coming out of this area and this region of the world. This present crisis seems to be more North versus South Korea than anything else, but it is a reminder that nothing has been resolved, and it remains, if anything, the closest thing to a global hotspot.
Okay, all right. And, Sanjay, close the show for us with the best way forward, really, as far as this entire situation is concerned.
Yeah, from South Korean perspective, this escalation must end at the earliest. Although, Kim Yo Jong, the Kim Jong-un sister, she is being blamed for all these in the South Korean media and the South Korean people. South Korean people, they are foreseeing US as a negotiator in this escalation, and they want to they don't want to forge it to some kind of further escalation and conflict. But on a positive note, especially the older generation of Korea, they don't want to see the inter-Korean talks being dismantled. So from a collective perspective, if we can see that US is going to join the bandwagon with the North and South, and again you open the talks and the discussion, I think this is going to happen very soon. Although Trump is not showing much interest in this particular escalation, but South Korean politicians are very much interested to bring US to the table and once again open the discussion.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that this issue between the North and South Korea is a historic one. It continues to linger. South Koreans want peace, and maybe it is time for the Americans to come to the negotiating table and talk about something and really bring about some kind of peace in the region. But then what South Korea wants and what the US wants are two different things, is what the